Hey guys, Rose from Mecco here. Today we're going to do a walkthrough of our new Smartbox Controller. For those of you who are familiar with our T2 controller, I think you'll find that you can navigate this interface pretty easily. To get started, we'll walk through the different screens that you'll see on your touchscreen pendant. This is the main screen. Up at the top you have your marking window, so you can see I'm connected to a 50 by 17. And this will correlate to the marking head that you have plugged into your system. This is your date and your time. And down at the bottom right, you have your test button, which will do a simulation of anything that you have in the job file. This is your go or mark button. This will trigger your marking head to mark. And this is your stop button. Over to the left, you have menu, insert, file, font, force and speed, and position and shape. So we'll start in the menu screen. The first thing you see is you have addition and marking. These are the two different modes that you can run your system in. Addition will give you full access to create job files, make changes, and run the system. If you have a job file already set up and you just want to mark, you can select marking mode, and this will disable the ability to create changes. If you do need to make changes, you can press and hold the test button, and that will release the controller. Down in the bottom right here, this yellow square, this is a counter. So if you have a specific number of parts that you want to run in your batch, you can specify that number. So let's say we have 100 parts that we want to run. Hit OK, and as you run the system, that number will count down and it'll stop once it gets to 0. Okay. Next we'll look at parameters. So your mechanics, marking, and addition parameters, these will all come preset with your system. So the main screen we'll look at is controller parameters. You can see we have a list of different sections we can go into. So we'll start with some of the dynamic information that you can insert into your job file. So first is shifts. If you want to specify shift codes, this is the screen you'll use. So you can specify the number of shifts that you have, and then you can specify what text or string you would like to be marked for that shift. And the shift code is going to be controlled by the starting time. So right now I'm set up to have shift A at 8 o'clock and shift B at 1500 hours. This is in a 24-hour format. Now any changes you make to apply those changes, just check the check mark. And now those settings have been applied. Calendar, this will apply to date codes and timestamps. So if you want to change the separating character, you can do that here. So let's say you want a hyphen instead of a dash, or dash instead of a semicolon, you can change that. And then if you need to make adjustments to your date and time on your controller, you can do that here as well. Okay, and the X just discards any changes. Next we'll look at counters. So you have two counters that you can set parameters for, C1 and C2. You can specify the number you want it to increase by, any repetitions, so if you have two parts that you want to have the same number, number of digits, whether or not you want leading zeros, you can set a min and a max value, and then any time that you want it to reset, you can specify that here as well. And if you scroll down, you'll see that you have two general counters as well, CG1 and CG2. Parameters, you have the ability to set the same parameters as your normal counters. The biggest difference is the general counters will continue to increment no matter what job file they're in, whereas C1 and C2 are specific to a job file. Communications, we're going to skip that screen for now, so we'll move into statistics. This is where you can find general information about hours on the system, but the thing that I find to be most helpful is the time of last marking. So if you ran a mark and you want to see how long it took, you can find that here. Language, this gives you the ability to switch languages. I'm going to leave mine in English. Okay. Password, the default password for all of the systems is 6 zeros. Okay. This screen will always be password protected, so you'll have to enter that in order to get into the screen. If you want to change the password, you can do that here. So you'll need any 6-digit string. Okay. And these are the different screens that you can password protect. So if you want to enable a password in order to go in and make changes to parameters, you can switch that to yes. Same thing with addition. So in order to get out, if you put your system in marking mode and you want to require a password to get out of marking mode and back into addition, you can set that to yes as well. Next is your controller screen. So this is where you can make adjustments to the controller. You can adjust the brightness, whether or not you want it to beep when you press it. If you want a screensaver, you can find the version of your firmware. And if you need to update the software, you can do that right in there. Okay, and timers. So you have the ability to set parameters for 3 timers, and these are in milliseconds. Generally, you would use I/O or some sort of trigger to fire your mark, but if you want to embed, let's say, a delay into the job file, you can specify the time you want the system to pause, and you can set those parameters for each of these 3 timers. So that covers everything in the parameters screen. Next, we'll look at USB. If you have job files or logos on a flash drive that you want to transfer to the controller, you'll do that here. So the first thing you'll look at is the direction that you're copying to and from. You have the ability to change from Smartbox to the USB or from USB to the Smartbox. So we'll say we're pulling from a flash drive and transferring to the controller. So I have my arrow going from USB to Smartbox, and then to choose the files I want to copy, you go to Copy Files, and this will pull up the flash drive, and any job file that you have on that flash drive will show up here. So you can select an individual file. I only have one on here, so only one is showing. But if you have multiples that you want to pull, you can select all. Logos work the same way. If you have a logo on your flash drive, you can copy that here. And if you do embed a logo into the job file, you will want to copy both the logo and the job file to the controller. iOS, this is if you want to check the status of your I/O. Okay, and that's everything that we'll cover in the menu screen. So next we'll look at the insert function. So we set parameters for some of these in the menu screen. And you can see we have different icons going down the list here. So we have shift codes, calendar codes, objects, counters. This is any motion that you have. So if you have like a rotary or a Z-axis, and barcodes. Okay. So if I select this button, it will insert the code for an automatic shift code. And this goes back to the parameters that we had just set for shift A and B. So if we do a simulation, you'll see it shows us character A for the first shift. Calendar codes or date stamp, time stamps, you'll find those in here. So you can select the format that you want. So let's say, for example, we want a Julian date. We can select day of the year, and it will automatically populate that code into the job file. And the information will pull from the controller for the date and the time. Next will be logos. So any logos that you want to include in your job file, you can select that here. And next is the counters. So you can see we have C1, C2, CG1, and CG2. So if you want to have automatic serialization, you can insert your counters there. And if you want it to start at a specific value, you can actually go and change the number in the job file. You do have to use the arrow keys to make the adjustments to get your position. So let's say we want to start at 20. We can do that, and then once you start to mark, your serial number will start at 20. We're going to go ahead and skip the automation here. If you do need that, or if you need more information, feel free to check that out. If you need any help, you can always give us a call. Next, we'll look at barcodes. So you have the ability to do a square data matrix, a rectangular data matrix, or a QR code. The most common that we see is really the square data matrix. So you'll see the cursor is in between the parentheses. So whatever information you want to embed into that barcode, you type in between those parentheses. And then it will automatically generate your barcode. And I believe, okay, so that was everything for the insert function. Now, if you are just looking to do general text rather than dynamic information, just select the line that you want to enter text onto and type in your information. You do have the ability to do multiple lines of text, so you can just select each line. Now, if you want to open up a job file, you can use the browse function. This will list any files that are on your controller. So if you want to create a new job file and start from scratch, you'd select this button here, and it will erase anything that you had on the screen beforehand. So to open a job file, there's two ways you can do it. You can select your job file. Logos, if you select a logo, it will not open it. It has to be the job file, which is the TXT extension. So you can either double tap and it will open your job file, or you can select that button. Okay. If you have just created a new job file, or if you edited a job file you already had and you want to save it, you'd select your save function here. And then you can either rename it or you can overwrite the existing file. If you need to delete a job file, you select the file you want to delete and select this button here. And the last icon here will show you a preview of what's inside your job file without opening. So if you select the file you want to preview and then press and hold this button, it'll show you what's inside. So we'll just start with a fresh sheet and we'll add our text back in. All right, so now you can make adjustments to your text. So we'll go into our text screen here. So this column gives you the ability to adjust the height. So let's say I want my text to be small. I want it 1 millimeter tall. You can specify that there. This is the width. It's done as a percentage of the text. So for example, if I need my text to be condensed, I need it half as wide, you can type in 50 and it will shrink the text for you. And that was kind of small, but make that bigger so you can see the difference. So you can see the text is a little bit skewed. I'll leave that at 7 for now. Font, you do have a few different fonts that you can choose from. The default is Gollum. That's what I typically use, but you can change that if you'd like. This is your character spacing. This is also as a percentage. 25% is the default, but if you need your characters to be a little more spaced out, you can increase that number. So we'll go ahead, we'll try 75. You can do up to 200%. And now you can see our characters are spaced out. And the last thing that we'll look at is your dot density. So the default is auto. If you leave it in auto, you'll get the peen technology. So you get a nice scribe appearance. It's a continuous fire as your marking head moves. Now, if you have an application where you need to set your dot density or you want your dots to be spaced out and you can see the correlation between the striking of the pin and where it hits, you can set a parameter for this value. We found 15 to be kind of a nice middle ground between appearance and speed. So you can see our dots are a little more spaced out. Okay. Now you may be wondering what the dashes are for. If you have multiple lines of text, these dashes, the lines correlate to the string of text that you're looking at, those lines. The dashes will pull the value from above it and apply those downward. So you don't have to set parameters for each individual line if you want them to be the same. This is your force and speed. So typically on a pneumatic system, the only thing you'll use the force side for, which is this one, is if you have a value set for your dot density, you can set the system to strike 1, 2, or 3 times. So 1 to 3 will strike 1 time, 4 to 7 will strike 2 times, and 8, 9, and 10 will strike 3 times. I found this to be helpful if you're doing a 2D barcode and the one strike doesn't quite get you enough depth. If you need more depth, you can just increase that force and make the pin strike multiple times. On the right, you have your speed. You can run from 1 to 10. 1 is the slowest, 10 is the fastest, and the slower you run the system, the deeper your mark is going to be. If you run it a little bit faster, you'll find that your mark is a little more shallow. So the last screen we'll look at is your position and shape. So you can see you have X and Y coordinates, and you can either leave these by default or you can specify the coordinates. Your reference point for the object is the bottom left-hand corner. The reference point for the screen as a whole is going to be your top left. So for example, if you want to specify your Y dimension, it will have to be at least the height of your character. So right now we're at a 7mm tall character, so I need my Y to be at least 7mm. Now as I increase that number, it will move that object further down in the job file. Next is your Z. So if you have a Z-axis hooked up to the system, you can set that here. I don't have one, so we won't enter any values there. The next is an angle. If you want to set your object to be at an angle, let's say we want our text to be at a 45-degree angle, you can specify that there. Now you will have to adjust your X and Y coordinates because if you can imagine, remember the reference point is the bottom left-hand corner. So if you take that object and rotate it, it's going to move the left side out of the X and Y windows. So we'll just move these over a bit. Okay. Now as you're doing this, you can test it out. It is a little bit of trial and error to make sure everything fits. And if you are outside of the limits, it'll give you an error and show you that. So our text is too big for the marking window that I have in right now. So we'll go ahead and make this smaller. Now you can see our text is within the marking window and it's at a 45-degree angle. And the angle does go in a counterclockwise rotation. Okay, next we'll look at doing radial text. If you want to put your mark on an arc, you can specify the diameter here. So let's say we have a 20mm diameter, we want our text to ride along. And then you can choose whether you want your text to be convex or concave. If you do convex, your text will read inward. If you do concave, your text will read outward. Okay. Now, whenever you do a diameter, the reference point is still going to be that bottom left-hand corner of your text. And the starting point is based on a circle. So 0 is going to be the top of the circle, and then if you want to change the position, you can adjust the angle. And this, again, goes in a counterclockwise rotation. Okay, so you can see the M starts right in the center, and then the text curves from there. Now, if you want your text to just be arced straight in the center, you can adjust the justification. I find this to be a little bit easier to center justify it. Okay. And the justification works with just normal text as well. If you have it left justified, your text will be on the left side of the screen, center. What it's doing is it's actually changing the reference point from the bottom left of your object to either the center or the bottom right. Okay, so we'll just set this back to 0. The last thing you can do is you can mirror your objects. So you can do that either horizontally or vertically by changing that to a check mark. All right, so I think that covers everything with the touchscreen pendant. As always, if you have questions or if you'd like more information, feel free to reach out, give us a call, and we'll be happy to help.